Industrial chemical synthesis typically relies on brute force. To break or form molecular bonds, we use pressurized environments and temperatures far exceeding water's boiling point. Yet inside a living mammalian cell, these exact same complex reactions proceed at a perfectly stable 37 degrees Celsius. This creates a strict thermodynamic problem. At standard biological temperatures, organic molecules are remarkably stable. They do not possess the ambient kinetic energy required to spontaneously react. Left alone, they would remain inert for years. This resistance is the activation energy barrier. It represents the mandatory energy threshold that a molecule must cross to reach a transition state, where its existing bonds can be reorganized. Biological life circumvents this requirement. Instead of adding heat to the system, cells utilize enzymes. These proteins act as submicroscopic spatial manipulators that bypass the energy barrier through mechanical positioning. By orienting molecules into precise reactive geometries, enzymes allow metabolic processes to occur at low temperatures. Without these structural scaffolds, the chemistry of a single breath or heartbeat would be physically impossible. The enzyme does not catalyze a reaction in a single leap. It operates by creating a transient, unstable intermediate state that requires significantly less energy to maintain. This logic is captured in the Michaelis-Menten model. Enzyme E binds with substrate S to form an ES complex. Within this intermediate complex, the enzyme exerts physical force. It grips the substrate and torques its bonds into a stressed orientation before releasing the final product. Because the molecule is already held in a state of high tension, the reaction becomes inevitable. We see a massive drop in the energy required to reach the transition state. The steep activation curve effectively flattens. Enzymes function as chemical shortcuts. By physically reprogramming the reaction pathway, they enable life-sustaining chemistry to occur millions of times faster than it would in an unregulated environment. Although an enzyme is a large, complex protein, its catalytic power is concentrated in a tiny atomic-level pocket known as the active center. In this schematic of the active center, reactive power comes from specific amino acid residues. One critical residue is serine, providing an exposed, highly reactive hydroxyl group, marked OH. Within this confined space, it transfers phosphate groups to the substrate, destabilizing its internal structure. Serine's activity is often synchronized with a second component, the amino acid histidine, which features a complex imidazole. This diagram maps the hydrogen bonding between residues and a substrate. Histidine's nitrogen strips or adds protons to destabilize the target. This absolute precision, indicated by the 2.88 and 3.04 angstrom measurements, requires atoms to be positioned within fractions of a nanometer. The capability of a massive biological catalyst ultimately rests on this angstrom-level alignment. A handful of hyperreactive atoms are positioned so perfectly that they can tear other molecules apart with minimal energy input. The exact feature that makes the active site powerful, its highly exposed reactive chemistry, also makes it the cell's most vulnerable point of failure. Certain foreign molecules can trigger an irreversible inhibition event. They don't just mimic a substrate, they form a permanent covalent bond with the active site, destroying the enzyme's utility forever. Under normal conditions, as shown here, the enzyme acetylcholine esterase processes its standard substrate, acetylcholine, within its active site groove. However, specialized toxins or nerve agents, such as DFP, are designed to infiltrate this exact pocket. The toxin permanently bonds to the serine residue's hydroxyl group. This locks the active site in a closed state. Because the bond is covalent and permanent, the enzyme can no longer accept its intended substrate. A single toxic molecule, like cyanide in cassava or a peptide in bee venom, can trigger a lethal cellular shutdown, blinding the cell's metabolic engine. There is a second form of metabolic disruption that relies on structural mimicry rather than permanent chemical bonds. This is known as competitive inhibition. Here, an inhibitor molecule possesses the precise atomic contours required to successfully masquerade as the intended substrate. Compare the formulas for the true substrate, succinic acid, and the imposter, malonic acid. Because their shapes are nearly identical, the enzyme's active site cannot distinguish between them. The imposter occupies the site, but fails to trigger a reaction. This creates metabolic gridlock, stalling the assembly line as active centers fill with non-reactive mimics. This specific vulnerability is the foundational logic of pharmacology. Antibiotics often function by introducing these structural mimics to stall the essential metabolic pathways of invading bacteria. Because enzymes rely entirely on geometric shape and atomic charge to select their targets, we can decelerate specific metabolic cycles by introducing non-reactive analogs that occupy the active sites. A cell must modulate its metabolic velocity based on shifting resource levels. It cannot function if every enzyme is firing at maximum speed, regardless of the cell's actual needs. This dynamic control is managed through allosteric regulation, which utilizes secondary regulatory sites entirely separate from the main active center. When an effector molecule binds to this remote site, the resulting tension causes the entire three-dimensional structure of the protein to physically warp. This change in shape at one end of the enzyme clamps the active site on the other end shut. This structural shift creates a feedback loop. If the cell's molecular inventory is too high, the excess products bind to these allosteric sites, slowing the enzymes down. As levels drop, the sites clear, and the enzymes return to their reactive state. Allosteric regulation acts as an autonomous cybernetic system, allowing the cell to throttle its own metabolism in real time to prevent resource exhaustion. Zooming out, this flowchart of the Krebs cycle represents just a small corner of a massively interconnected metabolic network. Every arrow represents an enzymatic gatekeeper. Each node is a transformation of matter dictated by a specific enzyme's geometry. Despite this immense complexity, every metabolic gate in the body falls into one of just 6 functional categories. From transferring electrons to splitting molecules with water, the entire taxonomy of life's chemistry is organized into these 6 battalions. The state we recognize as living is the result of this submicroscopic orchestration. Millions of molecules are perfectly channeled and transformed by these topological scaffolds, relying on pure structural precision to dictate the logic of biology.